G'day guys, Mackie with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to be... Well, we've had a very positive, I'd say 2 weeks, so it's about time we had a bit more of a negative video. Not super negative, you know, we're not going to shit too hard, we're not even going to talk about Matt Ward. Ah, damn, just did. Oh well. Can we finally admit I was right about the Primaris Marines needing to be reactionary now? No? Okay, fine, be that way. See if I care. In all seriousness, enough time has passed now that we can look on how the plotline has played out. Chaos, the ever-looming threat, has basically failed to materialise, with every game being met by the Imperium and the threat basically being seen off. No key worlds are falling, and any areas taken by Chaos are basically useless to the overall plot. Nurgle owns some planets in the Ultima Segmentum. That's nice. Prospero is one with the planet of the Sorcerers in real space. The consequences for the story? Well, here's the point I want to make. There are none. Really, none. Chaos had a foothold in the Eye of Terror for 10,000 years. It doesn't matter how long you have a presence if you do nothing or are incapable of doing anything. Essentially, you are besieged on your own planet or realm. Magnus could mass the entire Legion on Prospero, but it wouldn't mean jack if he can't move the forces or wage war in a protracted campaign in the systems around him. At the same time as this, the forces of the Imperium are growing, renewing their strength with new recruits, and experiencing a very dubious technological renaissance. Chaos itself is bringing the same old forces. Yes, there's some shiny new sculpts, but every time a demon Primarch pops up, Papa G comes in to smack them back down. They get the occasional new toy, the odd item of war gear, but we aren't talking the game changer that the Primaris are. And not just in the game sense, but we're talking in the lore sense, in the stories that builds on the universe around it. Because the game is one thing, but the stories are another, and attract a completely different type of people. Chaos is stagnant. The faction which should have the most going on is completely hamstrung by the plot. Abaddon has just stalled straight out of the gate, and it simply doesn't feel like Chaos is a threat. Rather than having a horde of inhuman monsters created by Fabius Bile leading the assault, a threat which could have directly led to the new units and war gear Belisarius has added to the game, actually throwing the Imperium onto the back foot, instead we have Chaos being the underdog in this new world. How long can this be sustained? Chaos, being the mustache-twirling villain, is so episodic that it's comical. Are we going to rinse and repeat the same formula time and again? In fact, I'll tell you what the formula looks like. I can dot point it for you. Demon Primarch emerges, and then they, along with their legion, invade real space. They do this with a couple of new specialist units, usually an infantry squad, a Terminator squad, some heroes, some war gear, and maybe some tanks or monstrous creatures. This is then followed by a string of victories on unnamed and unimportant and thus meaningless worlds, and eventually the Imperium halts their advance, and they settle into just holding that little corner of the galaxy. Then the Imperium is not actually affected by the events in question at all, apart from the person who read the story being told that it's a big deal. And that's the thing, you're not being shown that what Chaos has done is huge, you're just being told. Is it just me that thinks this is going to get old really quick? For me, it already has. And we're just 2 books in, basically. Or 2 tales in, I should say. I'm fine with Chaos invading the Imperium, but maybe they should be doing something visible. Not some warp storm across the galaxy. No, that doesn't count. I want to see a map. A World War II style map. Something like what showed the Japanese advance or the German advance in World War II and the conquered territories that they amassed. You know, the old red line and the short sticker advancing into Soviet Russia, pushing back the Soviets, and then the Soviets pushing the Germans back. Some sort of visible map would be fantastic, not just warp storms. You could almost treat the warp storms as impassable terrain, like the North Pole or Antarctica was to World War II. Or neutral countries. It's basically stuff that's not useful to the Imperium. You need to actually show a clear, large chunk of the galaxy taken over, with the Imperium actually reeling and just barely keeping up with the strain, instead of some resurgent empire under Gilliman. You need to show Forge Worlds falling to the traitors. You need to show us a host of Marine chapters virtually wiped out. Some who we actually know from the fluff, maybe. They don't have to be super important, but it could be named chapters that have a visible presence in codexes, like Doom Eagles, Disciples of Caliban, Size of the Emperor, things like that. You could have a large arm of, say, a crusading fleet like the Black Templars, just crushed, trying to halt the traitor advance. And then, maybe then, I will feel like there are some stakes in the present game of 40k. Sadly, 40k is now an episodic cartoon, with Chaos being the proverbial Skeletor, slinking out of the shadows each morning to harass the Imperium's He-Man. At the end of the day, the episode ends with the evil defeated, for now, and ready to try again next show. Until this is fixed, the fluff won't grab anyone's attention, and how long will the miniatures sell themselves if the fluff in the background has no engagement? The lore of 40k has always been its strongest asset. It's basically the biggest sci-fi franchise outside of Star Wars and Star Trek. It has a 30-year history to its name. Let's not piss it all away now for a weekly cash grab of new miniatures. Let's stop devaluing the brand with subpar materials. Let's go back to the days of 4th edition, where the fluff was arguably strongest, and take your time doing things right, Games Workshop. Anyway, angry episode, I guess, bit of a rant, but I think it stands on its own laurels. You can't have your threats being just useless, essentially. It just means that the good guys just don't come out as being all that great. Rather than them seeming better, it actually brings them down. Because you're like, well, of course the Imperium's going to win, it's just the Imperium. It's just common sense they're going to win. But if you show, like, a large swath of the galaxy taken over physically by chaos, not talking like warp storms or anything like that, maybe people will say, oh, fuck. Chaos actually, is conquering the Imperium. And if you can see a physical threat like that, it is so much easier for your brain to grab onto the lore and say, there are stakes now. But unfortunately, that's not what's happening. So anyway, maybe I'm completely alone in this comprehension of the materials, but please, thoughts and comments below, and I'll see you all next time.